I'm fixing to commensurate this trial here. We gonna see if we can come up with a verdict up in here.
Welcome to another Dreams of Consciousness mixtape. This one titled Funny Title TBA. But this is the Philippines podcast, and I'm here with a very special guest. Would you introduce yourself, sir?
Hey, what's up, people? This is Ian from Brimstone In Fire.
Ian from Brimstone In Fire, among other things. Ian has been my guide throughout through the world of Filipino metal. So anytime you see a Filipino metal band on the blog, Ian had something to do with it. And this goes back to about 2004 when I met Ian for the first time, and he took me to a gig in... Was it in Santa Mesa? Where was that?
That was Marikina.
Marikina.
At the old Killa Johns.
Yeah, and so his old band, Demiurge, played that night. So did End of Man. Do you remember who else was on the gig? I think there might have been a couple of hardcore bands.
Yeah, that would have been one of the old Manila independent music scene shows where it's mostly punk rock and hardcore bands playing. Often it's just End of Man and Demiurge playing.
And whoever else you could get to join the gig.
Yeah.
Cool.
We usually play with different bands from all over the place. It's not just Manila. We have a lot of bands from up north, like Bulacan. I don't know if you remember, but Throw played there. And that was the original Throw lineup, which are made up of those people from the guys from Dead Ends.
Yeah, and Ian just had a little blurb put in the, for all you Malaysian scenesters out there, Ian just had a little blurb put in the latest issue of Shock and Awe, talking about Dead Ends, the old Filipino hardcore band. Credit where credit's due. I actually met Ian through my old classmate from high school, Isa Pilapil, who was the guitarist in Demiurge, and is now the other guitarist in Brimstone In Fire.
Yep, I remember you guys getting in touch and we were supposed to meet you somewhere. She was convinced that you looked a certain way.
She was remembering the Adrian from high school, who I'm not ashamed to admit it was kind of Jesus-y, kind of Jesus looking, maybe Jesus with a Napalm Death shirt. And in that time and between the last time she saw me and when I moved back to Malaysia in 2003, I'd shaved my head, and so I didn't look like that at all. And I think you, who'd never met me,
Yep.
saw just kind of a bald death metal guy walking down the road and was like, that must be him.
It's that Napalm Death hoodie. That wasn't the dead giveaway.
Making friends wherever I go.
Yep.
Napalm Death hoodie. And I'm not, this is kind of an awkward thing to say, but you're actually a huge find for me as far as getting to know somebody in the scene, because you've been embedded in the scene for a long, long time.
I would say a long, long time. I mean,
well, let me put it to you this way. I got into this music around, let's say, 93, 94, and by that point you were already playing in a band, right? Here in Manila?
yep, I had like weird garage bands.
Yeah.
With my best friend. It wasn't really a band. Really call that a band. But, yeah. We had instruments, we had a noisy little space.
And
That's
neighbors,
pretty much it.
and neighbors overhear what you were doing, so counts as a
Counts as
gig.
an audience, yeah.
What would you say your first real band was? Real in quotes.
Real band. Like we played dates and stuff. Can't really recall. I had an old UP band.
UP being a University of the
Yeah,
Philippines.
it wasn't a real band because we'd only play in school. That didn't really count. Yeah, I had a band with my best friend back in the early mid '90s, and I think that would have been my first real band because we wrote real songs, our own songs, and because we were too lazy to like do covers, which is we originally wanted to do a lot of, not really Descendants, but along that line of kind of rough distorted guitars with a lot of melodic stuff in it. We didn't really think that it was gonna be punk rock or anything. We didn't really think. We thought the Descendants were like closer to like Gin Blossoms, and we'd think of it that way, and didn't really consider it as like, hey, this is underground. 'Cause we didn't really have an idea of what that was, and at the same time we were DJing, playing music for other people using like we were like a mobile disco, going around town and stuff like that. The people rent us and our stuff, and so back then it was a huge thing because the band scene was big. It never really shrank down, but we didn't really get into that until much later. So we were a professional sound system is what we were. We were doing stuff for business sake and not really for the arts or anything like that.
When was Strap On 7-inch? Because that's the band that I hear out of all your pre-Demiurge stuff. That's the band that I hear about the most.
Well, strictly speaking, I think that would be, I'd say that would be the first real band that I was part of that really got out there. But never really considered it that way because they were a band before I even joined them. The foundation of the band was already there long before I joined them, and they already had good stuff. Don't even think I contributed much. Nervous energy.
were you singing and playing bass?
No, I was just playing bass. Okay. Well, singing, that would be totally subjective. It depends because our singer, he had this bad habit, Jeremy, of not singing in parts of the song.
Was he also playing guitar at the same
Yes,
time?
yes. The other guitar player, Erwin, who also one of the founding members of The Beauty of Doubt.
Okay.
And he has a lot of other bands to consider. He was I'd say, one of my local guitar heroes. He didn't really do the whole guitar solo thing, but he was a tight rhythm guy, and that was hard to find back then. People like take that for granted, and so he was in this old band called Free for All, and they play a lot of melodic punk covers, like a lot. So you see see them play like a lot Face to Face or what else did they cover? Like I don't remember if they do Good Riddance or they did a lot of that stuff. And he was really like he can really like, sing and play at the same time, which is not that easy, especially for like musicians. Like if you can consider us musicians at that point. So he and I would like look at each other when Jeremy stopped singing, and let's just sing it, whatever. But it's not like it doesn't happen all the time. And eventually we just wrote that into the song. Because the guy can sing.
Right.
Jeremy can kind of sing, yeah. He in the beginning he was the goofball, kind of almost Fat Mike-ish, kind of. He was huge. The guy was huge. Our singer then, he was around 6 feet something. He played ball. He played ball for Ateneo. He could be a baller.
Yeah.
Right. So
local basketball.
Yeah. But I don't know. He wanted to be a philo professor and a punk rocker. He, a little too much bad religion. Yeah.
How did you get into punk rock? This started to sound like an AA meeting.
Yeah. It's
Confession time.
funny because back in grade school, back during those days, there was this huge negative image on punk rockers, and we didn't even know what they were called back then, because we were like,
Are we talking like late 80s, early 90s?
this is mid 80s.
Mid 80s.
Yeah, and I don't know, the PTA that just warned everyone that these people were Satanists, people with their hair on end, standing on end, and that the anarchy logo is supposedly satanic and all that good stuff.
Right.
So the rumor is these people pick up kids from the elementary schools and sacrifice them to Satan and shit, which is, I don't know, it's the funniest thing. And we didn't really see them. We lived in the suburbs. It was like, oh, it's just trees and kids on bicycles. It was like, I could imagine people who lived around that area. If I brought you there to Recto, which is where they all hung out, that is as far from the suburbs as it'll get. It's like real inner city stuff.
Yeah.
And at every street corner, there's a punk dude. And they were being called Satanists, like just, you can imagine, it's not even 20 kilometers away in my nice little sheltered neighborhood. Got to know a lot of them when I started spending more time at my grandmother's house back in the late 80s. Because my neighborhood there in Santa Mesa, that was, I don't know, it was like a punk rock mecca. Only because it's one jeepney ride away from where they hung out in Recto. And I don't know why, but they'd all hang out in my neighborhood and they'd be drunk. Like, you know how it is here.
Yeah.
Like, local sari-sari stores would have like beer. I don't even think Red Horse was a product back then.
Some San Miguel, some Ginebra.
Yeah, whatever it is that they were drinking, and they'd be hanging out at the local stores, and it's like they became fixtures.
Just the drunk guys hanging out on the corner with some beer.
Yeah, mostly the nice guys.
Yeah.
Was some of the really hard druggies. I only like hear stories about them, or I met them once or twice going to Recto, and you don't really meet them because they're like passed out on the sidewalk. But I guess you're looking for bootlegs and shit, and they're there.
Yeah.
Like, they don't pay attention to you much because you're wearing your high school uniform. It's just you're like just some student looking for music. We were afraid to go to shows because I was a kid. My cousins would bring me to these big concerts because back then there wasn't much of the music politics, I'd say. So my cousin would bring me over to watch the Dawn.
Old Filipino punk rock band. So you saw the Dawn, and there was a rockabilly band opening for them.
Yeah, I don't remember the name.
Okay.
It's I knew it was rockabilly because my cousin explained to me who the Stray Cats were, and I kind of have an idea of that. And it's generally that guy, that one cousin of mine, who got me into a lot of local punk stuff. And he was because he kept giving me nice things to listen to, and I'd always like say, hey, this is better than this and better than that, and then.
Do you remember any of the names? Any of the bands?
Old bands? No, these are not local bands.
Okay.
So he'd make me listen to a few glam rock albums, a few metal albums, a lot of punk and I don't know, general listening for someone growing up in the 80s. And,
Right.
and stuff. And I'd complain to him that local stuff can't cut it with things we get from overseas. And then he started making me listen to his. He has a collection of old, mostly bootleg local bands. Well, there's the occasional TRC, Twisted Red Cross, which was arguably the only label at that time releasing underground music. So, if you've seen anything from the 80s recorded locally, it would usually be a TRC release. Which is, in a way, really important because a lot of it's music history now. Like, at least Philippine music history.
Yeah. I'm guessing all this was released on cassette.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think there are a few ones on vinyl, but that's just me assuming that it was available before and it wasn't that expensive to make because I know of a few people who had theirs made and it's just stupid pop songs and they made it for cheap and they didn't even get it released. It was just something that they gave away to friends and family. So I imagine if a record label wanted to release something back in the day in any format, well, not CD obviously, but in any of the old formats, they could have. It was a possibility.
Yeah, I grew up in the Philippines, and I remember around the time when I started getting into music, I was 13, I guess around 13 years old, and the only format you could find music on was cassette. A lot of, I guess, the bigger international bands you'd find CDs from, but the disparity in price was such that, you know, I think it was like 70 pesos or 80 pesos for a cassette, and almost 400 pesos for a CD. So it's like, you know, you could buy 4 or 5 cassettes for the price of one CD.
Yep.
So by the time I graduated high school, I probably had hundreds of cassettes. The other thing I remember is that finding like good underground music was tricky. Not impossible, but tricky. You had to find, because there were the top 40 sort of outlet stores, like Odyssey was one.
Yep.
I don't remember what the others were. And sometimes you'd have to go to somewhere like an SM, like a Shoe Mart, or even National Bookstore had a pretty good collection of like old Napalm Death and Hypocrisy and, you know, some death metal stuff, which is really strange if you think about it. Like, why would National Bookstore have so much death metal?
Well, I don't know. Maybe it's tied in with the distributor.
Right.
Right, so it's just there.
Yeah.
Or someone's playing a funny little trick on it.
Somebody just dumped a bunch of death metal cassettes on this bookstore that sells a lot of religious.
On the door again.
So you've got this older cousin who's introducing you to all this stuff. When did it click? When did you realize that the stuff that you were listening to, or that you were gravitating to, was different from what people around you were listening to?
Well, like the thing is I that really didn't happen that way at all because I think I was one of the lucky ones who hung around with a lot of people who we kind of had liked all the good things at the same time. We didn't have, like, when I spend summers over at my grandmother's house, people in the neighborhood were all listening to good stuff. There were a couple of radio stations back in the day that played really, like, a lot of old new wave, and it was you could almost say that it was the norm. I mean, the neighborhood was pretty cool. There were a lot of young dudes there who weren't, I don't know, misinformed, who had good taste in music, and we had neighbors who were old hippies, and so there was, everywhere you went, there were probably a few people who were like the musical equivalent of a Philistine, and, you know, it's but most of the time it's like my aunts, my mom's younger sisters would all be listening to really cool shit. We'd have records. I had an uncle who had Venom records.
Wow.
And he had the first time I saw, like, the most devilish thing on an LP was a Creator album he had that a friend of his sent him, and it was hilarious. It was just it was already all over the place. So I consider myself as one of the lucky ones. I had that background, and I had that cousin, my cousin who was eagerly going to the shows and buying the stuff and making his own merch, and, you know, it's well, back then it's like bootlegging. It was.
So you were kind of grandfathered in. You were kind of Michael Corleone into the scene.
It was practically. Well, that's why I find it somewhat unfair whenever I criticize, like, someone who listened to Slipknot first before they listened to Slayer, you know,
Right.
Shit like that, because
If your uncle was listening to Venom and Creator when you were growing up, you kind of got a leg up.
Yeah, I guess you can say that. This is a leg up. I think I got the whole ladder. is what I got.
rightly or wrongly, my impression of the scene is that things in Southeast Asia were pretty tame until a foreign element brought them in. Like, I've talked to your guitarist Don, who said the first wave of death metal bands in the Philippines were actually guys on the US bases. who had their own death metal bands. Is there truth to that? Was it an outside element bringing stuff like this in? Because I know under Marcos, a lot of foreign music was banned, and I'm assuming punk rock and heavy metal was among that.
Yeah, there's a lot of truth to that, because a lot of the good stuff actually did come from the periphery of the wherever the US base would be. This is probably true because I've heard stories from Isa's from Cavite City. Her family's from there, and they're very close to Sangley Point, which was back in the day the thing when the government banned the PX's retail. All these imported goods were banned from the usual marketplace, but in Cavite it was like everywhere because of Sangley. Concessionaires there, they just dump everything out, music included. So wherever there are stations, I guess you can imagine there are hippies and rockers and all sorts of weird subcultures sprouting everywhere. So yeah, there's truth to that. I mean, you'll hear some people here if you manage to get to like speak to anyone from the old scene, like the scene like Dondi and the others used to run around in.
Dondi, the guitarist from Brimstone In Fire.
Yeah, you might meet someone or talk to someone from that era, and they'll claim that they did it first, or whoever they got in touch did it first, or it's something like that. But the truth behind it, it's like someone really did bring it in. Someone, like, you wouldn't be surprised. Someone from the States, which is very unlikely because most of the Pinoys I know who go to the States, they come back and they're hip hop.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is also the reason why breakdancing was such a big thing back in the 80s here. It's like, dude, you've got dancers and you've got, like, over there, punk who dance their own way.
Yeah.
With themselves.
Yeah. The conventional wisdom is that there's always a band like Black Flag or the Dead Kennedys who, trailblazed and played shows in places that nobody had ever thought of playing shows before. And so, Black Flag would play some small town in the middle of Missouri, and the next time they went back to that town, there'd be a punk rock scene of kids who had no idea what they heard the first time, but decided that they wanted more of it and decided to just create it. Did something like that start up here, where kids were like, well, if we can't get Death and Obituary and Morbid Angel to play here, then we have to come up with our own version of that.
I'm really going out on a limb here, say that I don't think that was the purpose.
Okay.
I think a lot of the so-called pioneers, the compliment I can give them is they were aping whatever it is that they heard. They heard something, they liked it, and they're aping it. There were a few brave ones who tried to put a local twist to things, especially with their band names. Because some of my very close friends from back then, they didn't even bother writing in songs in Filipino. I don't know what the motivation is behind that, because you'd read some of these English lyrics and they suck! So you play to your strengths, and what is it? What's keeping you from writing in our language when you can't even write English? What is it? I guess it's the escape factor in it, where you're just growling and just...
Yeah.
So no one to understand what you're saying anyway. So what's the point in having good grammar or composition? Yeah. It doesn't really matter.
It's not like Trey Ezektot's lyrics were that much better. So I guess we're grading on a curve here anyway. So you might as well.
Well, yeah, I'm nitpicking at this point.
Yeah.
Because just to be fair, it's a global thing that we're not bothered by perfection so much. It's just that I find it a tad bit hypocritical, whereas it's like the Americans mostly speak just English.
Yeah.
Right? So we have a language of our own, which I think we can't mess up.
Yeah.
So it's just a funny thought.
Right.
We can't mess this up. Why don't we just write in this? We play to your strengths, right? I mean, but no. I'd like it messed up. This metal is messed up, right? So.
Well, I think it goes to a point where you and I are similar in the sense that we don't grade our local scenes on a curve, and especially where when I think of my scene, when I think of the Malaysian scene, I think of a lot of bands that are doing a local, maybe generic version of a more popular band, whether it's old thrash or grindcore or D-beat punk. And where I find a lot of similarities with you is you can be pretty harsh about the local scene here in the Philippines.
Mm-hmm.
Especially a lot of the bands, whatever trend becomes popular. So,
Yep.
10 years ago it was metalcore.
Yeah,
and so
yeah.
we had a lot of the local versions of As I Lay Dying and whatnot.
I think it's just mob mentality at this point. It's you mentioned that in Malaysia it's all about like local versions of this and that, and good luck if it's grindcore.
Yeah.
Because that generally implies that you're gonna let it grow. It's not like you're gonna go napalm death all the way or whatever.
Yeah.
It'll grow. It'll definitely grow. You're listening to the music already, and that's gonna get you further from where you started at any given point. But
Right.
here, well,
I mean, I feel conflicted because on one hand, 10 years ago my complaint was, why do we have all these Malaysian bands that sound like Creed? Why do we have all these Malaysian bands that sound... No, seriously. Like, every Malaysian band that I heard had singers doing the... Yar, 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 yar,
what year was this when this was happening?
this would have been like 2004, 2005.
Oh well, I think we have a leg up.
Okay.
I stress it. It's like a ladder.
Yeah.
It's a whole fucking ladder. It's not just a leg. Because back in the mid '90s, same thing was happening here. It's Pearl Jam,
Yeah.
or it's Scott Weiland,
Yeah.
or it's one of those.
Yeah.
It's like, wow, who would do the best Pearl Jam covers?
Yeah.
Who would do the Eddie Vedder voice the best?
Yeah.
It's like that. It's what's really good about it though is it didn't really make it into the songs, because only a few bands were able to really put something out. But there were a lot. There were a lot of bands back then. There were a lot of bands. Like I wouldn't go so far as say there were thousands of bands, but there were a lot. Maybe 999 or more. I don't know. There's a lot of them back in the day. I used to run a rehearsal studio back in the mid 90s, and we wouldn't have off days, and no band would go back in the same week. It's once a week.
Yeah.
And we'd be full from the 10 a.m. all the way till 6 or 7 in the evening, and it's just the amount of, I don't know what it is. I think it was a good thing because people aren't doing, well, I'm not saying they're not doing drugs, but
Right.
they probably still are. But
Yeah.
there's a lot of
I mean, for me, it's frustrating because clearly the talent is there, but rather than, and this goes back to why I'm conflicted. It's like, well, you could be in a cover band, which is the lowest form of band that you and your friends can aspire to be, which is
tribute.
Yeah, exactly. just playing somebody else's songs and trying to do it as close to what they did as possible. Then the next level after that is we're going to be a thrash metal band, and all our songs are going to sound exactly like Slayer.
Yep.
Or like some weird mix of like we're going to sound exactly like Slayer or Sodom.
Yep.
And then in certain genre here, there's a metalcore band that sounds exactly like As I Lay Dying.
Yes.
I think the last time we went to a show together here in Manila, it was a band that sounded exactly like the Deftones. There's always going to be.
Yeah. There's a.
Yeah, there's always going to be.
that.
There's always going to be that kind of band, and you want to tell them, just take a step back and be a cover band. You're not doing yourself any favor by playing exactly what your heroes would have done, except with worse songs and poorer English. You know what I mean? But is that fair? Because maybe the step from that becomes something new comes out of that. And the only argument I have against that is I haven't seen it yet. I haven't seen the band that started as some kind of weird tribute to someone and then became something really cool. Or maybe we just don't have a long enough timeline to see that. What do you think?
By that time, someone else is running the show.
Maybe.
But I don't know. Same thing here. I'm guessing it's the same everywhere. It's not just a Philippines thing. It's not just a Southeast Asian thing. It's a global thing.
Yeah.
There are copycats, clones, and all sorts of shit. Most of the time, these copycat bands are usually the obnoxious ones. They hear something really cool and they think that they're the first ones that heard it, and they're reveling in it. It's thinking that, wow, this is it. So we're gonna do this. Like I don't know. I've told you about bands here that'll just take that one measure from a Nile Behemoth or Morbid Angel song and just play that over and over, and that's their song.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, it's just, you don't hear that. You don't consider that as just not making your own shit, right?
Yeah.
It's, and they arrogantly think that what they're doing is acceptable.
Yeah.
At any given point. I mean, I guess because people's standards are so poor,
Yeah.
So low, it's accepted. Oh, these people, we're one scene. They're nice guys. We're having fun. Yeah.
That's the conundrum.
Yeah.
The nicest guys always make the worst music, or the most egregious offenders to taste and originality. One term that I keep running into every time I visit you is rockista. Can you break down what rockista is for everyone outside of the Philippines?
Yeah. I guess if we had an urban dictionary,
Right.
like the direct translation of the word rockista would be rocker. But it isn't that simple.
Yeah. It's used here in a very disparaging sense.
Yeah.
It's almost used the way like hipster is used in the States.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Some people clueless enough would think being hipster is cool.
Right, exactly.
Same thing.
Yeah.
It's the same exact thing. It's not a class war, but most of the people who enjoy being rockistas aren't exactly, I don't know, it's a little too elitist of me to say, aren't exactly, they're like, unknowingly they're the mob
Yeah.
of people who they go to shows and they just want to have a good time, right? It's like
It sounds like they're kind of new jacks. Like there's no deeper commitment to the scene. They just kind of, it's almost like the tide. The tide brought them in, and the tide will pull them out.
you can say that, yeah. It's fair assessment, but I consider a group of people who are like that as just the ones who have, it's like a passing fancy.
Right.
I consider those as probably just wandering kids that not really looking for something in general, just looking for a good time is what they're doing. I consider a rockista would be more invested in it. He'd be more conscious of what he's doing. In a way. Right? It's like naively thinking that what they're doing and calling themselves as such is hip.
Right.
And yeah, it's true. A lot of them bring a lot of support in for local scenes, but not exactly stellar in terms of integrity and everything like that. Because they don't understand. I mean, we don't have the time to explain this all to them again, because we did,
Yeah.
and nobody listened. They usually gravitate towards almost radio-friendly bands. Is what they're mostly composed of. I don't know if it's the music that they love, or the fact that they have their own community, and maybe it's just us that we're just being stingy and elitist, ageists, and it's not, we're just being assholes at this point.
Yeah.
But it became derogatory to a point. It's very difficult to explain without sounding.
Yeah, it is I mean, the reason I bring it up is it's a layer to the Filipino scene, which I don't think is apparent if you go to shows here, unless you're in the scene. You know what I mean? Or unless you have unless, like, for example, I have somebody like you explaining all this to me. But it struck a chord with me because it's very similar to my experiences where, when I moved back to New York around 2008, and I started going to shows where, kids around me were all either dressed like they fell off the back of a Creator album from the 80s, with like their jean jackets and their patches all over them. And the white tennis shoes.
Yes.
You always, you're not making a fashion statement unless you have the white Nikes. Or on the other side, it was the hardcore kids who just discovered death metal. And so they loved all the same things at the same time. It's like somebody gave them a list of things to buy, and so they bought them all at once. And so suddenly it was like,
Information overload.
Right, exactly. And so like everybody loved Suffocation and Dissection and At the Gates, but weren't really sure why. But because they'd come from a different musical background, all of a sudden they loved it all equally. and had no context for any of it.
That's why Darkest Hour was born.
Right. I mean, yeah, and it's, for me, I'm far from an OG. I was 13, 14 years old when people started saying death metal was dead. So I clearly came in on the second wave, or maybe the third wave. But for me, who'd been around long enough, it was like, well, I've already seen one generation of kids kind of get into this and get out of it. And, for all you kids dressing like you really mean it, it smacks like you're trying a little too hard.
Yeah.
And it, and I feel the same way when I go to shows in KL, and it's the exact same thing. It's like the kids who are dressed exactly like kids dressed in 1983 because that's what's cool to do. And I don't know, maybe we're just like the asshole old guys.
Yep.
who just like hate everybody who came after us.
I started thinking that way just very recently, because looking back, the problem is I had no basis of comparison using myself. It's like I'm trying to empathize, trying to put myself in their shoes. I can't. It wasn't that big an issue. The more elaborately dressed you are, it was like the less seriously people took you.
Yeah.
There are bands that play in jeans, white t-shirt, and that's pretty much it. And everyone dancing at the front row are all like battle gear, armed to the teeth. With it's like they raided like a couple hundred merch stores with all those button pins, and it's just something else. I mean,
I'd just like to point out that if you're, sitting in your room stitching 100 patches to your jacket, that is not metal. And if you're getting your mom or your grandma to do it, that is also not metal. That's all I'm going to say about those patch jackets.
Desolations, raising, go.
Yeah, it seems the Philippines is one of the few places in Southeast Asia, maybe Thailand being the other, where you don't have government restriction on this kind of music, and the religious authorities are tolerant. Maybe that's the best way to describe it, or ignorant, or just not in a position where they can really go after the local music scene.
Not like Indonesia where
where
they chopped off everyone's mohawks and
yeah. And so I guess my question is like, what are the big hurdles for the Filipino music scene?
I think not having any.
Really?
Not having any is the actual hurdle.
I do notice that even the death metal bands tend to be fairly political. So it seems like if there isn't something to rally against, it the same kind of fire and motivation isn't there.
Yeah, well, that actually is a personal thing at this point. It's not like a club that we have a club that goes around saying, "Hey guys, we say no to this."
Yeah.
There's no underlying authority telling people what to do. They said no on their own because the stanky little, I don't know, they can smell it. We didn't have to tell them it stinks.
We're recording this interview in what's essentially your home studio. A number of the bands, probably most of the bands that are going to end up on this podcast, were actually recorded here. So I'm going to go ahead and give you a label, which you can, if you like it, you can take it. If you don't like it, just throw it on back. You're kind of the Scott Burns of the Philippines. I would say most of the bigger bands have utilized you at one point or another. As a producer, what do you look for in local bands?
Well, I don't know if that's fair to say. That I don't really look for.
You are fairly picky in who you'll.
First of all, space is very personal. Again, it might sound judgmental and elitist and all that shit, but it's very special. I don't want people that I don't have to deal with to be around me. I don't want that kind of aggravation. People think it's a business. It's actually not. It's a community service more than anything. So I'm already volunteering a lot of my time to try to get some really good stuff out there. We're producing 2 compilations that I think we need as a I don't know, as a community. And I wouldn't say we handpicked these bands because a lot of them volunteered. So I don't know about being Scott Burns, and I don't really see it that way. It's more like if you had a kind of, there's a community center. I'm the guy who has the lock and key for all the basketballs and stuff. It's more like that. Someone else is administered.
You're not organizing the basketball games. You're just letting them in onto the court.
Yep. They're playing their own way. I'm not telling them how to dribble the stupid ball. Yep. We don't have a signature sound. It's like the sound that we make. The band made themselves. They're just using the stuff we have here. So the least I can do for them is warn them in certain pitfalls that most people, especially people who haven't really experienced like a real recording studio, things like time management and simple things like that you wouldn't think are important because everyone's thinking about the technical aspect of it all. It's like, oh, this guy sounds like this and that. Oh, his guitar is noisy and shit. Those are things that there's no signature sound. I know a few people suffering from the stigma of having to have a signature sound, and all of the stuff that they make sounds like that. Nobody wants that. They want to be the go-to guy for this kind of thing. And the problem is, if that's the goal, then I think you automatically fail right away. It's like a disservice to the actual sound. It's because you're trying to feed your ego and strengthen your portfolio, and I don't have a portfolio. And it's most of the stuff I have is very private.
Is there one release that you're particularly proud of?
Proud of? Yeah, you've heard the cliche. They're all my children, all that bullshit. No, I have my favorites, and One of them, very biased as I might be, is still the old Demiurge disc that we worked on. It's in a way sounds dated. The drums sound really old, and the guitars are tinny, and everything about it is just it sounds old. Considering the stuff that we've been working on, like as of late, it's just wow, it's old. But I don't know, for what it's worth, I blood, sweat, and tears. That's what went into that thing.
From different steel, lanes of Christianity, inflicting wounds of righteousness upon the masses, upon the mindless. Force of fanatic zeal, slaves to the apostles' creed, burning Edens at the stake, genocide for heaven's sake. Now, spend life in blood, no one left. To see the fate bred from the sands of hate. Suicidal men of war, taught from childhood to hate us all. To the teeth they fight, rock the infant and only might. Kill a man, woman, and child, raining terror from the sky. Victims spend life in blood, not life.
In addition to being a studio engineer and recording these bands, you also do a bit of motion graphics and video editing.
Yeah, I love doing that. I love doing shit like that.
How closely related are the two?
I have to say that they're two different animals altogether. If you can appreciate the cliche, it's they both kind of take a toll on you while you're doing it. One's a little more intensive than the other, depending on how heavy the project is. Like I love putting videos together. It's a thing I love doing. I would say it's like a hobby or a pastime, and it's almost always related to music. It's like a music video helping somebody's put together, or I'd maybe say that my creative input in there is stronger than when it is with the music, because most of the time, yeah, like you said earlier, there's a certain criteria of bands that come here, and then I love how they're all prepared when they come here, and they're all ready, and they have their own identities, and I don't have to help them with that. But on the visual side, I have a kind of thinking of an aesthetic for these guys. It's like, hey, cool, they can do this, and we can do this and do that, and dress you up as this, you know. It's funny. It's just it's funny as hell. I worked with some people that made music videos back in the day, and when you go back on that, or maybe later I'll show you after. And man, these are, it is just funny seeing the process and how they worked, and they were being paid by major labels to put together music videos for their up and coming artists, and it's like, oh man, this is it. And this is thinking back then that it was so difficult to get stuff together, like the late 90s, early 2000s, that some people were using, well, as a preference, film stock for real, and these things are expensive.
Yeah.
And in order to use this, they'd have to like get real lights, and they have to get a real crew and everything. Now it's just it's easy as hell. Just, hey, any idiot with a DSLR can put anything like remotely creative like together and shit. So it's not that difficult, and I like doing it because it keeps you sharp, like, you know.
That's as good a place to end as any. Thank you, Ian. Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I was looking forward to going to like play. I was thinking of putting together a little tour for some local bands to go to Malaysia, and
Yeah.
it's
Exciting news. Breaking news.
so what I want to happen is that I want certain bands from over here to just dive in there and just and it's everyone's so. Very few of us leave, like, and go and play. Like, Down from the Wound is probably our we can consider them as our ambassadors at this point because they've played everywhere in Southeast Asia. Puzzle Vomit has done
At
gigs in,
Singapore,
yeah.
right?
They Bangkok, and to me that's really important. I mean, yeah, sure, it's like you said, the brutal death metal scene all over the world is just one scene,
Yeah.
right? It's
Yeah.
just they
Somewhere in the world, there's a band practicing a breakdown right now,
yeah.
and a drummer counting out a 4 count on his snare. Right, exactly. Yeah, the unfortunate thing about Southeast Asia is the countries aren't that far apart in either culture or distance, but we're separated by, large bodies of water, which means that before any band can think about a regional tour, they have to get their plane flights together and stuff like that. I guess it's possible that you could take a boat from Indonesia to Singapore to Malaysia, but it doesn't sound like it would help. It would work too well.
And I'm looking at the stuff that's been happening around, like in your photos from Rumah Api, and
Yeah.
I think people over there enjoy a little bit of punk rock from over here.
Yeah.
There's a whole bunch of up and coming, like, I don't call them acts, but these bands are the band Goo, who've been around for ages. They're releasing something really soon. It's coming up. We're practically done. The drummer is this young guy that's been, I don't know, he's second generation. His legacy. His family is like just been in it since day one. It's like he brings with him that kind of cloth and work ethic that's just you don't see in kids his age, and he's got a band, and I think maybe they're the perfect duo to like send over there. I don't know. Well, let's work it out.
Yeah, I was hoping whatever bands play Singapore and possibly Thailand, we could get them a date at Rumapi. One of the bands that I was hoping to get over was Brimstone In Fire. And any band that's touring from Indonesia and Singapore, going up to Thailand, if they need a Malaysian date, chances are they're going to play Rumapi. And yeah, it would be a dream come true to me to get a bunch of the Filipino bands to play either all together or as
Separate dates.
right as dates become available. Figure out some kind of Philippine Malaysia metal exchange. All right, signing out. I'm Adrian Saul.
Yep. And this is Ian.
Thanks for listening.
Stay classy.
You stay classy, Planet Earth.
And onward goes the Sting of Oz.